Are you guys ready to get started?
Yeah,
Great.
where you are.
All right, go for it.
Okay, awesome. Welcome, everyone. Interesting choices of pizza and ice creams over here, but really, really excited to be here. I think this is probably the second or third webinar that we're doing in collaboration with RevOps Co-ops, and it's really helped us to understand the community of RevOps Co-ops and what you guys are looking for. So Riley and I, when we were brainstorming, we said, what's the next topic we should do? And we really landed on this topic of how to perform a RevOps audit. And we'll get into that in a second, but maybe I just wanted to start by quick introduction of who I am. So my name is Sarika Garg. I'm the co-founder CEO of Cashflow. And what is Cashflow? So Cashflow is a CPQ for SaaS, software as a service. We believe SaaS is a relationship. But what that means is it's not only about closing the deal, but it's about helping to automate the workflows that go across closing deals, upsells, renewals, and that's what we do. And we find our customers are able to close deals faster. They're able to get rid of a lot of the busy work that RevOps ends up doing. And here, I'm really, really excited to introduce Reese Williams. Reese, maybe you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Reese Williams. I'm one of the co-founders at a company called Domestique. It's a RevOps consulting agency. I live here in Denver, so for all those Denverites, it was extraordinarily cold this weekend. As you can tell, I do not like pineapple on pizza. Grew up here, had to move away a bunch, but came back here. Buddy of mine started Domestique. Thought it was going to be a side hustle, turned into our main hustle. So we work with B2B tech SaaS companies from large seed rounds all the way up to pre-IPO, doing everything from technical stuff, so CRM implementations, migrations, marketing automations, to more strategic stuff, capacity planning, forecasting, so on and so forth. So we got a team of about 20 of us between full-time and contractors we work with on a regular basis. And excited to chat today about RevOps audits.
Right. And maybe just to sort of explain why we thought we would bring Reese in. I met Reese, I think in December sometime, or maybe it was November. And I was very impressed with Domestique and Reese. And the reason was we meet a lot of RevOps partners. And clearly Domestique stood out because they were thinking of RevOps very strategically. And they really felt that RevOps can actually have a pretty big impact in really taking a step back and thinking about how they can do this how they can do their jobs in a very systematic way. And so that's why we thought, let's bring Reese in, let's actually just have a conversation with him. And the goal is, of course, to learn. I actually wanted to share a small anecdote before we start. So what are audits? In my job, like I don't really come across audits, but actually, interestingly, my first job was as a grad student was at Conagra. And if you guys have heard of Conagra, it's one of the biggest food companies in the world. Reese, you probably know Conagra.
Yeah.
And my first job was an auditor. And what I learned about audit was we were working with so many smart people, and all these smart people were so busy doing their jobs every day that they weren't really seeing the forest from the trees. And what an audit really helped them to do was really take a step back and really assess all the things that were important and what they might be missing, what they might need to do more about. And that's where I think audit becomes super important, right? Reese, what do you think? What do you think of audits?
Well, first and foremost, you're being too kind in terms of myself and Domestique. My sister would probably disagree with a number of things you said about me, but audits, I think, are one of the best ways to kind of like take a kind of a point in time of like, hey, where's the organization at today? I think one of the things that we're going to hopefully try and get across in our conversation with everybody today is not just how to theoretically do it. I actually generally hate when people get on panels and just talk in theory. But we're going to try and give you guys some tools about like, hey, to actually go and do this. And then once you come out of the audit, how do you go and start to execute against things? One of the important notes, and we'll get into this a little bit as we get into this conversation, is like in audit, we're big believers in whatever comes out of the audit is not good or bad, right? It's not this binary thing. It's just on a spectrum, right? It's a point in time of like, okay, you and your company may be here. All right, now we have this as kind of an anchor point and we have a roadmap moving forward so that when we do another baseline in a year or something like that, we then can understand, hey, how have we progressed against that? So how are we continue to move the ball down the field, to use a bad sports analogy?
Right. And, so when I think of audit, sometimes I think, oh, do I have to bring external people in? And what we're going to try to do today is actually make you self-sufficient. So give you some tools so that you can get started today or tomorrow and make it very actionable for you. And then maybe to start with, as we go through the session in the next 50 minutes, the one thing that Reese and I felt was it would be great just for you guys to ask questions. Let's make it interactive. Bring us your real life questions so we can bring them into the conversation, right, Reese?
Yeah, we much rather like you guys be interactive, because otherwise, if you don't, it's just me and Sarka talking for an hour, which I can promise you no one wants to hear my voice for an hour. And it'll be a lot more engaging. We can double click into different areas to kind of like they will actually be impactful for each of you. So much rather have a conversation with all of you around what are the areas you guys want to double click into.
Awesome. So let's get started. Brittany, we're ready for you. If you can move to the next slide.
Well,
let's actually.
There's a caveat. We're only taking questions from people who don't put pineapple on pizza.
That's right. I guess I can't ask any questions. All right. So, well, the first thing that we thought we could start off by was really talking about what is RevOps. So in my job, I actually meet a new RevOps person almost every day. And the one thing that's really common is there's almost nothing common, right? Like you get them in all shapes and sizes, and some tactical, some really underwater, some being very strategic and thinking about what's next. So I just wanted to actually start by that and ask Reese, what is RevOps? Tell us more.
Yeah, so this is actually a topic I'm extraordinarily passionate around. I generally believe most companies, organizations, people out there are not defining RevOps broad enough, deep enough, things like that. So I was very fortunate when I first landed my first RevOps job 4 or 5 years ago. I had a bunch of talented mentors. At that time, I had no idea what it was. But I got my teeth kicked in about 500 different ways of Sunday. And this is kind of the framework we came up with. So this is what we use here at Domestique and informs everything we do. So a couple very important points here. First, it's across the entire customer journey. The reason why that's important is it's not just sales and marketing ops. Oftentimes, one of the challenging parts that we see is when RevOps reports into a CRO, and let's say that CRO owns just sales and marketing, all you end up inherently becoming is sales and marketing ops, right? This is truly inclusive of product, marketing, BDR, sales, CS, PS, all in alignment with finance, right? So that's thing number one across the entire customer journey. Second thing that's very important, we believe there's 5 work streams, and the order of the work streams is very important as well. So the first is something that we call planning. So planning is essentially strategy. This is your go-to-market strategy. Go-to-market strategy is everything from like, what's your ICP? What are all the different stages in your entire funnel, not just your sales funnel? What's your operating cadence, i.e. your structured set of meetings? How is marketing going out there? Are you using an ABM strategy? How do you think about events? How do you go outbound? The entire go-to-market strategy. One very important point here. If your go-to-market strategy is not documented on a piece of paper, it does not exist. The reason why that is so important is it's one thing to have an executive be like, oh yeah, I got a go-to-market strategy, but like it's so important to document this because you want that 22-year-old BDR to be able to understand like, oh yeah, our ECP is A, B, and C. When we go outbound, we only go outbound to these accounts. We're using these campaigns when we're going outbound. When something comes inbound, we're only taking a look at leads that are 1, 2, and 3. We don't look at 5, 6, and 7. So it has to be documented. Second is the process. Process is your day-to-day stuff coming out of your strategy or the planning work stream. So this is, how does a BDR take a first phone call? What are the questions they're asking? Are they using some sort of value-based messaging framework like a BANT or a MEDPIC? How do they put that information into the CRM? How does your CSM, have an executive business review? How does sales hand off a close one opportunity to the team? This is the stuff that allows your team to scale, because if you, again, process stuff has to be documented, but this is what allows you to have one, AE sitting in San Francisco and another one sitting in Singapore, and they're all doing the same stuff. Third is tooling. This is not just your CRM. This is the entire tech stack that touches the customer journey and should be set up based upon strategy and process. It shouldn't dictate strategy or process. We see a lot of companies, we work with a lot of companies that are like, well, yeah, we do it this way because this is how Salesforce is set up. It's like, no, stop, time out. What is your strategy? What's the process? Now let's design go-to-market systems. One kind of note here, we're big believers in setting up, like, food for thought here, a business systems council, right? It's all the key admins across all the important pieces of tech, making sure they're all in alignment, and they don't just say yes to all the changes. They say no to, like, hey, this isn't aligned to our strategy. Okay, yeah, we'll do this. And they work in kind of roadmap sprints. So this is a way that you make sure the whole tech stack is aligned. Fourth is data. Data comes out of your tech stack. A couple of very important parts about data. One, only measure what you can make a decision around. Let me say that one more time. Only measure what you can make a decision around. We see tons of companies that we work with. They're like, oh, cool. We have 500,000 dashboards. Isn't that sweet? It's like, no, who cares? Like, what, like, why? Like, it has to be data, it has to be data that you're actually making a decision around. So second thing about data, it's got to fly at the right altitude. So Sarka, you and I are having a conversation probably at 60,000 feet. Having a conversation with one of these other RevOps nerds on this phone call. By the way, I use nerds affectionately. I am a nerd myself. It's probably at 6,000 feet. Third thing about data, it's got to be presented in such a way where the end consumer of the data, i.e. BDR, RevOps leader, a sales leader, a CSM, actually understands what it means without RevOps explaining it to them and can then make a decision around it, right? So BDR is like, hey, look, why am I not converting these demo schedules into an SQL? Oh, okay. I'm seeing this in the data, so on and so forth. Last thing is enablement. So data highlights the hotspots across the customer journey, and you point enablement at it to address it. We think of enablement in 3 buckets. One is skills. How do you multi-thread into account? How do you have an executive conversation? How do you use MEDPIC? Second is tooling. How to use the tech stack to be more efficient, not less. And then third is competition or market. How do you position yourself inside the industry, objection handling, battle cards, pricing, so on and so forth. So this is the RevOps framework, which this is what we believe at Domestique. But what's interesting, it took me a long time to get here. This is how we kind of base all of our audits. But a number of the previous companies I worked at, I actually had to sell this framework internally, because most executives, most companies don't think about RevOps this way. And it had to be like, no, this is RevOps. This is why we are doing these types of things here. And it just took me beating the drum countless times for people to be like, oh, okay, this is RevOps. This is not just SalesOps 2.0. Sorry, I know that was long-winded.
Yeah, no, but that was super important. And I can see from the comments that was very helpful for the team to see, and there's a lot of excitement in the chat here. So it totally makes sense. Maybe a question for you: what is how does this translate into a RevOps team? Like what does a traditional team look like that's doing all these pieces, right? Tell us more. Yeah.
I love this question, partially because when I first started my first RevOps job, it was just me, and eventually we grew to a team of 15, 20-ish, supporting a global team of a couple of hundred. So it looks very different, but in a perfect world, and I explain what I mean by a perfect world, think of RevOps in a few different kind of buckets. First is what we call your field operations, right? This will be your marketing operations, your sales operations, your CS operations, your product operations, but it should roll into RevOps in a perfect world. Second is enablement, right? Enablement is a key function of this, and it needs to be aligned with RevOps. Third is your systems, right? These are those admins we talked about across all of your systems. Fourth, it's a bucket we call strategy and insights. We think of insights as backward-looking historical. How do we make sure we all have the same data? We're all on the same page. Forward-looking strategy is more around How do you think about capacity planning? What are we doing in FY24? Territories, comp strategies, so on and so forth. And the last bucket is deal desk, right? Deal desk is where you're managing those deals. This is a great example of where something like cash flow would come in. Those teams would be working closely with the deal desk. So that's an imperfect world. Very few RevOps teams are in a perfect world. And typically what we normally see is some sort of like Franken monster where RevOps teams are under-resourced. They may have a RevOps person, but then marketing ops is sitting under marketing. Tools may be sitting somewhere else. And so in those scenarios, one of the things that we always recommend is like, it's going to be a challenging to get that kind of perfect alignment, but setting up a team operating cadence where all the operators, right, your RevOps, the marketing ops, the systems people, are all coming together independent of who they report to and still working on a cohesive roadmap of key RevOps priorities and being aligned around what are those RevOps priorities and then communicating those back out to the org. So great example of this last company I was at, we had a team of like at one point 15 and only half of them actually reported into me inside of RevOps. The other half had different people, but we still had a weekly meeting where we get together, talk about the roadmap. Oh, hey, so-and-so, you're working on this. Oh, this is how it kind of, this is how it impacts what, Suzy Q is doing over here with things like that. But that informal meeting allowed us all to get on the same page and be like, oh, we're both doing the same stuff. How do we actually align these types of things?
There are lots of questions. I have lots of questions. Let me maybe try to put this into context. One question is, what you're describing seems like a big team and maybe spread out, as you're saying. But how do I sort of understand if I'm a company of 30 people versus a company of 100 versus a company of 1,000, how should I think of resources and maybe aligning my managers or my teams to staff me right?
Love this. So smaller companies, you're going to obviously have less people, and 99% of all companies out there underinvest in RevOps or operations in general. Hate to say it, that's probably going to be the thing moving forward. So you're going to be wearing multiple hats, right? And the hats are kind of those buckets I described earlier of like field operations, enablement, systems, so on and so forth. So the key is like, all right, if you have different individuals, what buckets do they sit in? Normally early on in most companies on the smaller side, Series A, Series B, things like that, your first couple of people is probably going to be one generalist systems admin, one generalist ops individual, and then then you may start to branch out and you may hire an enablement person, but those are probably your first 2 or 3 hires. The key when you're in that kind of smaller function is being thoughtful about the priorities that you're intentionally working on a quarterly basis. And this is the challenging part with all ops, right? Because what ends up happening is everybody's like, oh, ops can take care of that. Ops can take care of that. And they send 500 requests to you. And then it's just this kind of firefight. And this is part of the reason why doing some sort of like quarterly planning roadmap to essentially say, here's the ops roadmap. And whether it's one person or 15 people, this is what we are going to work on. You go and do a roadshow, you get everybody bought in to essentially say, yes, we agree with that. Oh, we're going to intentionally dedicate 20% of additional time for stuff that comes in ad hoc, but then you constantly are, updating people. Oh, okay, this is how we're doing against that roadmap. These new priorities came in. We reprioritize this. We kick this out, but allows you as an ops person to kind of work on the most impactful stuff, which is actually a good segue into the audit, but it also allows you to say no, because saying no is as equally as important as saying yes. And the things you choose to do versus the things you don't choose to do are equally as important.
Right. So making your priorities really, really clear so that everybody understands them and don't bombard you. Maybe connected to this is, we've actually worked with a number of companies in the last 6 months, which would say things like, we were a team of 10 and now I'm a team of 1. Like, how do I do this? Like, what can I automate? What can I, get rid of? Like, how do I do my job? Like, tell us more how you've helped people with that. Right.
Like, I think there's going to be a great conversation we're talking about inside of the audit stuff, but like the most important part here, by the way, Brittany, I saw your comment about the company junk drawer, and that was the reason why I was laughing, because 100% ingredients can relate. Number one thing you can do do that quarterly planning. But the key to the quarterly planning is you need to get the other go-to-market leaders bought into this. So Mr. and Mrs. CRO, Mr. and Mrs. Head of customer, Mr. and Mrs. CEO, so on and so forth. These are all the things you've told me. I've done a level of effort, level of impacts, level of, exercise, and we'll talk to you guys about what that is here in a minute. Here are the top 5 things I'm going to work on this quarter. I've got 20% additional capacity to take on ad hoc stuff. Do you guys agree with this? Yes or no? By getting people bought in, when inevitably the 500 additional requests comes in, you can be like, hey, Mr. and Mrs. CRO, I totally get the fact that this new thing here, you told me just a couple of weeks ago, this was your top priority. Do you want me still working on this, or do you want me to work on this net new thing? I don't have time for both, so I can pick one. My recommendation is we do X. What do you think? It gives you the ability, because everybody has agreed to it, to essentially say, all right, we're intentionally prioritizing the most important stuff.
Right, absolutely. And so you also have to think about, what can you, that goes into the audit of what can you actually put processes in place of, what can you automate, what can you do more of, so you can actually scale yourself.
Yes.
Right. So maybe, yeah, go ahead.
No, finish your thought. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, hey, let's maybe move into the audit, but please finish your thought and we'll move
No,
into the
I was going to say the same thing, because I actually think this is a nice segue of like,
Yeah.
one of the things we talked about is like, when is the right time to do an audit, right? If you're recently a team of 10 and now you're a team of 1, you should do an audit, right? You're the start of a fiscal year or the start of a quarter and you don't have a clear list of priorities, do an audit. If the team is going to make a massive number of investments, right? Hire new people, invest in programmatic marketing spend, things like that, and do an audit, because you're going to help optimize those investments. So anyways, we're not going to read everything on the slide, but these are all great times to do an audit. And like, this is a perfect time of year because 95% of companies are either just wrapped up their year and kicking off the calendar year, or about to wrap up, their fiscal year end and about to kick off the new fiscal. So this is a great time to do an audit if you guys haven't done one. And we actually have an example of a super lightweight one you can do at the end of this call, and we'll walk you guys through how to do that.
Maybe, Reese, the question that I would have is priorities. We talked about make your priorities clear. Is the audit is a way to get to your priorities? That's what you're saying, right?
The audit is a way to get to the priorities, but the other kind of impactful thing about the audit is it gives you an understanding of what are the biggest hotspots, right? Because I think the challenging part, and I know I make this mistake 1,000 times, is like, you go in a room, it's like, oh man, aren't I the smartest individual in a room? But by actually going through the thoughtful process of an audit where you're talking to other people, you're looking at the data, you may identify a hotspot, multiple hotspots you just didn't know was a big issue. And you're just like, oh, shoot. I thought it was A, B, and C, but it's actually A, B, and X. So I need to reprioritize how I'm thinking about what are the most impactful things. Because like, I promise you, everybody's always going to have a list of 500 things. So the question isn't, do we have enough things on the list? The question is like, what is the most important things that are going to have the biggest impact to the customer journey? And we should focus on those.
Right. So it's to help you define the items that have the biggest ROI.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Sarka.
Yeah, no, please go ahead.
Yeah, the ROI conversation, right? Like one of the interesting things here is like, if you go back internally and ask your bosses, your leaders, your executive teams of like, hey, look, I'd like to spend a few days a week, whatever it is, doing an audit. And they're like, no, we don't have enough time for it. Like what normally happens is those individuals don't have a good understanding of what makes good RevOps and the ROI that can come from this. And so like, if you get that pushback, I would use some of the data points or the bullet points highlighted here on the right-hand side, because I was actually talking with somebody else about this earlier this morning. I'm like, there is a clear direct ROI to RevOps when it is done well. And like, that's everything from like the ability to make data-driven decisions, forecasting accuracy. By the way, the last bullet point here, if you guys aren't looking at your sales teams using sales velocity, do it. It's a vastly better metric than quote attainment. By the way, quote attainment is the dumbest metric in the world. It is a stupid metric. I tell boards this all the time. So like sales velocity is a vastly better way, and you can actually compare reps across segments, geos, so on and so forth. Happy to get in good conversation. There's a great blog from HubSpot about what is sales velocity, so on and so forth. But there is a direct ROI to RevOps. So taking a day or two to do a high level audit so that you then have a list of priorities for Q1 / the first half of this year, I promise you is going to have a big impact on your ability to be successful.
Reese, I love what you're saying, because sometimes when I think of audit, I think of like, oh my God, this is a 2-month process. But you're actually saying, hey, this can be a starting point of 1 or 2. And let's get into like how do we break down this audit that it doesn't become a full-time job on its own. So let's get into the audit, should we? Like what are the work streams? Tell us more. Right?
Let's jump in the audit, but I want to double click on one point you made there, Sarka. We say this all the time, and like I see this in a lot of like operations people, like we love, and I'm using myself as a part of, we love to be detailed, we love to be right, we love to have the answer 100% right. Don't boil the ocean. Like I can promise you, you can do a audit in a single day and you probably get 80% right. You know, one of the things we always talk about internally at Domestique is directionally correct. Right? Do you have enough information to make a directionally correct decision around the priorities you need to do? Is that going to materially change if you take the audit from 1 day to 2 weeks? Probably not. Get this done quick and dirty. Don't boil the ocean. Sorry, Sarka. I'm getting excited about audit.
I totally love it.
My hands
it's so
everywhere.
important. Like, the 80-20 rule, like, you'll get 80% of your answer, and that's good enough for you to make an impact. So don't try to boil the ocean. Let's talk about the work streams. And how, like, let's talk through an audit process. Like, what does it consist of? Right.
Cool. So when we do an audit, Domestique, we have kind of 2 versions of an audit. What we're going to show you guys here at the end of the day is kind of like a even more condensed version of it. So we have a 4-week version and a 2-week version. However, when we go into an audit, what we typically do is we take those work streams I walked everybody through, and we think there's a number of key activities under each of the work streams. I'm not going to read these off, but like probably a number of these are familiar with each of you. So like as we think about process, right? What's a product feature request, right? When an AE is on a phone call with a deal and they're like, hey, look, I don't know if I want to go with you guys because you don't have this feature, right? How does that feedback get into the product team, and the product team then use that from a planning perspective? Demand gen forecasting, right? Do you guys have some sort of reoccurring meeting where you're taking a look at the annual targets via the capacity plan and essentially saying, how are we doing compared to those? Where are we seeing hotspots? And then what are the action items we're doing, right? Because if you get demand generation for, consistent, the ability to hit future quarter sales becomes that much easier, right? So on and so forth. So when we go in and do an audit, we took a look at all these different activities, and we take a look at them from interviewing executives, ICs, taking a look at the data to essentially say, all right, what's going well? What isn't going well? Do they have something today? If they do have something today, how effective is it? All that type of stuff. So this is all the stuff that we dive into, right? And, normally what we find is given any company, there may be 2 or 3 things that are not on this list that we add to this list, or there may be a couple of things that are on this list that we take off the list. But this is generally a good starting place of all the different things you guys can think about. And again, thing we'll walk through at the end of this has a bunch of these things, so we'll kind of talk through all of this.
So Reese, maybe one question from Liz is, do you know where I can find an exhaustive list of possible RevOps processes that could be audited?
Yes, the worksheet that we'll send you here at the end, it has all of these specific things. And here's the thing, if anybody has any questions at the end of this, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy. I know I'm technically a consultant. I promise you I'll just do thought leadership, and consultants are the worst. I generally hate them, and somehow I became one. So
we also had a comment that focusing on ROI can be too short term. I am getting from this and want to know if this is correct, but this doesn't seem like a set it and forget it proposition. This is when you think of an audit, it's usually like a one big project versus these are things we should be watching all the time. This is our opportunity to get a full temperature.
Yeah, so Lisa, this is an awesome comment. I'm so glad you brought this up. So a couple comments. First, whenever you're doing kind of an audit and you're kind of coming up with your list of priorities, there is going to be some sort of mix of short-term immediate stuff versus long-term. And you have to figure out what is the right balance, but it can't be all short-term and it can't be all long-term. Like it has to be some sort of mix between the two. And as you think about long-term, right? You know, it can be things, you know, I know you brought up like data integrity. It's like, all right, you know, but here's the thing, and this is the one thing I will push everybody on this call about is like, whatever you're doing, like, you know, so you use the data structure example, and I'm not picking on it, just using that since you gave that. Again, don't boil the ocean. A lot of the work you can do can get like, we fundamentally believe data is never good or bad. It's just on a spectrum. So like data is never going to be perfect. So how do you get it to such a place where it's 80% there? So as you're growing to those next, you know, ARR tiers that you talked about, it's like, yeah, we feel pretty confident in our data. We know it's not perfect and there's going to be one-off outliers, but it's good enough that as we grow and if we were trying to get it acquired, we'd feel confident standing behind this data. So long story short, mix of short-term and long-term priorities, but you should always be working on some long-term priorities as a part of your RevOps list.
So let me ask you just a very specific question, like criteria, right? So if I take an example like tech stack audit, what's the criteria that we should be thinking of, right? Like, is it number of clicks? Is it, you know, like what should drive these? Like for each one of these, it's the same question. Like, how do we like define the criteria, right?
Yeah. This is a really good question. I love the fact you picked the tech stack audit because the tech stack, normally what we do when we go through our kind of deep dive is we'll map every piece of tech stack. We'll talk about like, hey, how effectively people are using it, things like that. One kind of side note on just tech stack stuff, vast majority of companies have over purchased tech and are using them really poorly. Less is more when we come to like use the tech you have more effectively. Like I would look at tech from like how effectively is it being used? And when I talk about effectiveness, it's not like all the bells and whistles, but like think of your most basic CRMs. Like you don't need to do, you know, all the bells and whistles that half these tech companies roll out. It's like, what are you doing the basics well? And is it saving you time, right? Because at the end of the day, the most valuable asset in life, to get a little philosophical on everybody, is time, right? So part of our jobs as RevOps is how are we helping the go-to-market team optimize the time they're using so they can focus on the most important things, right? So tech stack audit, you know, criteria I would have at just a general criteria, particularly if you're doing a quick and dirty, is what's all the tech that we have? Do we know when it renews? And who's using it and how effectively are they using it, right? And effectively could be, you know, on a green, yellow, red, or a good, medium, bad, right? But it will no doubt highlight some hotspots of like, oh, shoot, we have all this prospecting tech, but we don't have a lot of client engagement tech. Or in this prospecting tech, these three things we're not using well. Do we want to re-enable them or do we want to think about getting rid of them when they renew? So those are the types of conversations as you're thinking about this overarching thing of how to optimize everybody's time more effectively.
Awesome. I love it. It's the focus on time and effectiveness versus just cost, which is often sometimes, at least in the last year, we've seen cost become like the biggest form of assessment. All right. Should we move ahead and maybe we have a few slides to cover? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last point on the cost is like, normally you're going to get that thing from a CFO and it's important to take into account, but like that is a short-sighted way to think about effectiveness, right? Like if you are using your CRM super deep and it's giving you great insights into your not only your sales funnel, but then your customer funnel, and you're paying several $100,000 for it. Yeah, from a cost standpoint, that is expensive. However, you're using it effectiveness, saving the whole team. So cost is an element, but it shouldn't be just the sole way that you look at the effectiveness.
Right. Let's walk through an audit.
Cool. So I mentioned a couple of these on the previous slide, but this is kind of like some of the basic steps that we go through when we're doing our audit. I'm just going to call out a couple of things. I'm not going to go through all this type of stuff. So when you're going through this, I would schedule meetings with who are the key stakeholders in and around the work streams, right? So when you're talking about enablement, you want your head of enablement there. When you want your tools, you want your tool admins there, right? We're talking about strategy, you're going to want your kind of different go-to-market individual leaders who are meeting with the strategies. One very important thing, make sure you're meeting with both leadership and ICs. One of the biggest things that we see is there's oftentimes a disconnect between executives and ICs. We'll get on phone call with both and it's hysterical. Like executives like, oh yeah, this is great. Oh man, I'm so smart. I've been doing this 20 years. Yeah, everybody understands their ICP and a BDR and an AU get on phone calls like, I have no idea who our BC, I just randomly pick accounts out of Salesforce. And it's just like understanding where is that disconnect between the two. So meet with them, ask them a series of questions around it. And one important thing about your questions you ask open-ended questions. There's a great acronym, TED, talk to me, explain to me, describe to me. So, hey, Sarka, describe to me what's your text, what are we using inside the tech stack? How effectively is the team using it, right? Then people can't just say yes or no, gives them the ability to kind of ask additional questions. There's also a great book out there. It's called The Coaching Habit. It talks about the 7 most effective questions. And in it, one of the most powerful questions is what else? And what they talk about in the book is ask what else a few times. Because what will end up happening is the first time you ask it, you get to this layer of depth. Second time you ask it, you get to this layer, and so on and so forth. It's intentionally an open-ended question, and people start to kind of open up as you ask it. So a couple of like tips, tricks and trade there. Next thing that's very important, make sure you also look at the data. The data, the story in the data needs to kind of line up with what you're hearing on the qualitative front of like, oh man, we got a bottom of the funnel conversion issue. Oh, hey, the salespeople were telling us that they're not doing a great job multi-threading. They don't understand the paper process really well. You want to see like, hey, does that data line up with that? The kind of last part as you think about it is like, all right, how do you come up with some sort of qualitative scoring system to essentially say, hey, look, yeah, we've got this, it's mediocre, it will give you the ability, if you're looking at a bunch of different things, to immediately identify, oh, seems like these 5 or 6 things should be at the top of our priority list.
I think you explained that really well. Let's go to scoring. And when I saw this slide, I was like, this is fantastic. Of course, I always want to know how I'm scoring against my peer, but who is my peer? And now, is that another project to figure that out? Or are there like SaaS industry best practices that Reese, you can give us? Tell us more about that. Right.
Yeah, so this is an example of actually our scoring system from one of the audits that we do. So whenever we do our audit scoring, so all those activities under the work streams. So for example, under the process work streams, there was the demand gen forecasting, right? The demand gen forecasting is something that we score internally on a scale of 1 to 5. We have a clear definition of how we score it. And then what we do is we kind of add up all that and it gives you kind of like a summary for that work stream, right? And like by adding up all that, you can kind of be like, oh, hey, seems like the process work stream is way behind kind of these other ones. So we should focus on some of the sub activities inside the process work stream. Where we get the peer scores because we've just done a lot of audits, we've had the ability to kind of say, oh, earlier stage B2B tech SaaS companies, kind of score in this range versus a later stage B2C. We can start to kind of look at what peer score is. I think the big takeaway for everybody here is like, don't worry about the peer score. Come up with some basic scoring system. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be consistent. And all this is going to do is going to give you a baseline of where you're at today. And again, the answer doesn't matter. It could, the answer could be purple unicorn, right? It doesn't matter. But if it gives you some sort of like baseline of like, oh, hey, on a scale of 0 to 100, we're a 37, right? Is that good or bad? Doesn't matter. All we then say is like, all right, when we do an audit in 6 or 12 months from now, we want to be higher than that 37 because we've done A, B, C, and D, right? So it gives you that baseline of where you're at. The peer score, like, unless you guys have a bunch of data that has a consistent framework, like the key is consistency in how you're looking at this. Like, it's going to matter.
I like what you're saying. It was actually one of the first things one of my mentors taught me, when I used to do reporting in my job, was like, it's not about how good your reporting is. It's about how consistent you stay with that report, because over time, that report starts telling a story. So you got to stick to it. And so think about it, but then stick to it for a year, 2 years, because it'll give you a pretty good measure, maybe even better than the peer scoring. Because who knows, like, who am I really like, right? Like, who, like, that's a little arbitrary, and consultants like to use that.
By the way, this like on just a pure side note, like this is why like when you get new leaders who come in, it's like, oh, I want to change the definition of an MQL, or we're going to change this. Push back of your RevOps team if it's not going to have a material impact on the team, right? Because like the amount of like companies we've seen were like, oh, well, we changed definitions 6 months ago, and then 3 months ago we changed them again, and then a month ago we changed. Like, you can't get any insights into your data, and like at the end of the day, like whatever you define it as, again, doesn't matter as long as it's consistent how you're looking at it.
Okay, so we've now gone through an audit process. We've scored ourselves. Let's talk about how do we implement recommendations?
So the roadmap. So like you've essentially say current state, where are we at today? What are the work streams that are doing well? What are the work streams that are not doing well? What are the sub activities that are doing well? What are the sub activities that are not doing well? How do we think about a roadmap moving forward? The way that we think about a roadmap is like, all right, those sub activities, what are the key things that we either don't have or we clearly need to level up? All right, let's document those onto a list. The next thing we think about is like, all right, what's going to have the greatest impact to the customer journey? Not just sales and marketing, but the entire customer journey. All right, the greatest impact should probably be in our crawl or a walk, not the run, right? As we think about this from a time horizon standpoint. The next thing we think about is like, okay, what are the dependencies, right? Oh, in order to do X, we need to do Y first. Well, if that's the case, Y then should probably be in the crawl, and then X is in the walk or the run. So they're worth intentionally thinking about how are we setting this up from a dependency standpoint. The last thing, and we'll kind of go through this in the document we'll walk everybody through, is thinking about things from a level of effort, LOE, and a level of impact, LOI. Normally, when we go through this, we do a very high level kind of LOE, LOI exercise where we do a low, medium, high. Because when you identify things that are low level of effort, meaning to implement, but a high level of impact, that's like no brainer home run stuff. Go do that today. And then Lisa, I believe it was Lisa, I apologize if it wasn't, getting back to your original comment, you do want to make sure that there's a mix of short-term and long-term stuff in the crawl. So you're not just doing the short-term stuff and you're never thinking about the future.
Right. So maybe, Reese, again, the question that's coming in my mind is, how do I relate this to my company? Is there a maturity curve to every company? Have big companies all done this and it's just a small company that hasn't? And we talked a little bit about this in the prep session. To tell us if you can add more color of what you've seen and how you've actually held people's hands to help them get better, that would actually be very helpful, I think.
Size of company unequivocally does not correlate to maturity of RevOps. Hard stop. We're working with a $400 million ARR company, and they're still working on how to define their different stages in their marketing funnel. Like, size of company does not relate to this whatsoever. Normally, what we see from a ops perspective, so this is from a RevOps perspective, there's a maturity life cycle, and I'm going to do a very poor job like drawing this in the air. But think about it like, so if there's an XY axis right here, it's a big curve right here, and then you start to see this long tail asymptotic thing. And what essentially that is like typically a company early on in their RevOps maturity, not company maturity, has a bunch of build things, right? When we come into companies that are early in, it doesn't matter the size of the company. Be like, oh, okay, you guys, don't have an account-based CRM. Let's think about that if you're a B2B company. Oh, you don't have lead scoring. Let's think about that. Oh, you don't have a forecasting cadence, so you don't have that. Oh, you don't have a demand counselor or demand gen forecasting. Let's think about it. But like, once you've kind of established a bunch of those kind of like processes, reporting structures, tooling, so on and so forth, all of a sudden the stuff you have to build starts to decrease and it becomes more of a maintenance plan. So like this audit recommendation will vastly differ if you guys are further along in your ops maturity or if you're earlier on in your ops maturity. If you're early on in your ops maturity, there's probably a whole bunch of shit, a whole bunch of stuff in the crawl and the walk Whereas if you're further along in it, there may be less stuff in the crawl and the walk.
We do have a pretty specific question. Someone would like to walk through one of the scoring lines and do like a simple scoring method on one of the work streams. Are we going to be doing that when we cover the evaluation tool, or should we go back a slide?
Yeah, great question. We'll kind of do that in the evaluation tool. So
Okay.
why don't we do this? Why don't we kind of do in the evaluation tool? Any additional questions, we can then go back and kind of like walk through that in the scoring line. Does that sound
Perfect.
good?
Yep.
Perfect. And I know we have 10 minutes left.
Yeah.
I've been atrociously bad, long-winded, so I apologize.
No, it's incredibly valuable what you're sharing, and that's why we're all listening. And I think from what I got from the last slide is you got to do crawl before you walk and before you run, and it's got nothing to do with the size of the company. It just really depends on the maturity, and you may have a bunch of work to do if you haven't done the crawl, but it will lead to goodness as you do that, right? So
100%. We can blow through this slide pretty quick. All this slide is, so this is an example when we do an audit at Domestique. For each one of those things you saw on the previous slide, each one of those activities, we put together a high-level project plan of what is the definition of done, how long does this normally take, who are the stakeholders involved and stuff like that, just so that you have a high-level understanding of kind of like what's involved in actually doing the work. So as you guys are thinking about audits internally, it may be helpful to essentially say, oh, okay, of the audit stuff, I'm going to do these 5 things in Q1. Let me put together a high level definition of done so I can effectively communicate this. One of the number one things I say across all organizations is the issue with ops is not effectively communicating. And what I mean by that is the analogy we use all the time is like, you can build a Ferrari, but if you never tell people about the Ferrari or teach them how to drive the Ferrari, it doesn't matter if it's sitting in your garage. So like, you got 5 priorities on the list. Effectively, like I can guarantee you, I can go to half the CROs I know, and if I tell them a demand council, people are going to look at me blank in the face. But if I say, "Oh, hey, this is our operating cadence audit," right? Since this is up on here, okay, we're going to intentionally go through all the meetings we have on the calendar. We're going to see who's in them. We're going to get rid of all the meetings on the calendar. We're essentially say, what are the most important meetings? We're going to have a clear agenda for every meeting because time is the most valuable asset. We're going to understand what is the prep required, associate any data required for that, and make sure that these meetings align up with our go-to-market strategy. The CROs would be like, oh yeah, makes sense. That seems like a very good exercise, right? So having a clear definition of done with all the key priorities that you're working on for the upcoming quarter.
Right. So again, write it down, right? It doesn't have to be a big exercise, but writing things down does help and clarify in your own mind what you're measuring, right?
Yep.
So awesome. And then I think this is actually our last slide. We wanted to, again, make this valuable. So not just theoretical, but actually give you something that you can use in your everyday. You can go right after this call and start using something to make an assessment. So maybe if Camilla, we can actually jump to the Google Sheet. We actually have a template for you, which you can download and actually use to do this assessment. And Reese, do you want to just walk through that just to help people understand how to use it?
Yeah, so what we've tried to do is we've tried to take everything we've talked about today and simplify it, right? So you're not having to do a 4-week or a 2-week audit like we do internally. What you see here in column B, the left-hand side, those are the 5 work streams that we talked about, right? Planning process tools, data enablement. You go down the path, you'll see all of them. Column C, these are all the sub-activities, right? So that slide that Sarka showed, right? Of like, oh, hey, under the process work stream, it's demand gen, it's product feature requests, it's all of those activities, right? So we've included that all on there. And I think that's the list of processes that you guys want to start with. And again, like I said, maybe missing a couple of ones here and there, take a look at it. But if I'm a betting man, it's probably going to get you 90% of the way there. Columns D, this is a very simple. Do we have it? Yes or no. If we do have it, is it in a good place or does it need a little work, right? It's just like you can go through it's like, hey, where are we at? Things like this. Columns E and F. This is the LOI, LOE exercise I talked about with you guys. Low, medium, high, right? So go through go through it of like, okay, we don't have it. What would it take to actually build this thing, right? Oh, okay, that's a high level of effort. What's then the impact to the customer journey, not sales and marketing, customer journey? Oh, okay, it's low. I don't know if that's wants to be on our priority. the way that I would go about this if I were each of you is I'd quickly look at this, kind of understand this, think about this from your perspective, but then I would go out and find 2, 3, 5 different stakeholders, again, mix of execs, ICs, to essentially say, hey, look, I feel like we have a good forecasting process, right? Road 10 here. What do you think, Mr. and Mrs. Sales Rep? Oh, actually, yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't really know what a commit is. I kind of like, sometimes update Salesforce, but we don't have a weekly process. Oh, okay. That's different than what I thought. Or, okay, maybe we don't have this, or maybe we have a version of it and needs a little bit of work. Okay. So like interview them to kind of like pressure test your assumptions, and then spend a little bit of time looking at the data. Like, oh, hey, the data tells us like our forecast accuracy sucks. Like maybe we do need to go back through and redefine commit versus best case. But what you can do, so when you go through and finish doing this, and like I said, you can probably do all this in a day, is the way that I would do this is I would then look at, once you've gone through and updated columns D, E, and F, I would essentially look at anything that's either you don't have and or needs work. And I would start with low level of effort, high level of impact. And then I would look at what are the medium, right? The mediums, this is where we're going to have to start to kind of prioritize stuff. And then the high level of effort, low level of impact are probably things you don't want to mess too much around or can go in the backlog. But I would start with that list, create a list essentially like, all right, here are the 5 or 10 things. I think of these 10 things, we need to do these 5 in Q1. I know I'll be responsible for 3. I'll need Susie Q over here, and I'll need Johnny over here. Then I would go on a roadshow. I would go back to the executives and essentially say, this is the audit I did. These are the results. These are the biggest things I think we need to address. Here's the priorities of these priorities. This is what I think we need to address in Q1. This is the roadmap that I want to do for Q1. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What do you think is missing? What else? What else? What else? Get everybody bought into that. And once you get everybody bought into that, start executing on it and then communicate back out to the org on a monthly basis. Oh, hey, I told you we're going to do forecasting process. Hey, this is the update on it, things like that. We're good to go here. We're tracking against this, bam, 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 right? It's telling everybody about the Ferrari, teaching them the Ferrari that you have to drive.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Reese. So this is downloadable for everybody to use. I really encourage, do it for fun to see where you land, and then you can kind of take it from there, right? And use it to ask the what else questions. So we're almost at time. Actually wanted to say we covered a lot of ground, right? I feel like I got educated in a very deep way. I think we're going to go do an audit on cash flow itself. But I wanted to ask Reese, if there was one thing that you would want the audience to take away, what would that be?
The number one thing that I would think about is part of the challenges, we see when, you're getting, I love the analogy that I think it was Brittany put in the channel, like the company junk drawer. When we see that, part of that is there's a misalignment between what your opinion of RevOps is and what the company's opinion of RevOps is. And one of the ways I've addressed this previously in my career, I would come up with your framework. You guys want to rip off that bow tie slide we had in the beginning? It's on our website, domestic.info. Take that, I don't care, like use that. Put it at the beginning of every PowerPoint you do that you communicate to everybody. I'm like, oh, hey, guys, just so you want to know, if you want RevOps, this is what RevOps is. It will get people aligned so that when you then come back to them, whether it's with an audit, your quarterly priority list, stuff like that, and you're saying, hey, we're working on these types of things. This is how it relates to it. People are going to start to understand that. And it will be a lot easier to say no to a bunch of the company junk drawer requests. And I promise you, it'll make your lives easier, whether you're a department of 1 or 15.
Yeah, I love that. Start from the beginning, like, get alignment. So thank you so much, Reese. I hope everybody enjoyed the session. I totally did. Camilla, over to you.
Well, thank you, everyone. I got a lot out of this, and I've been doing this 15 plus years. So it was awesome. So thank you, Reese and Sarika. Thank you so much. We will have a recording and a write-up, and I hope everybody has a great rest of their day.
Yeah.
Good luck. I hope you all improve your pizza topping choices. We need to work on this.
We'll
as
have
a
to talk. We'll have
community.
to have a talk, Reese. Like, I
This
think
is-
we need
this
to have
is
a.
you and I. We gotta have.
Perfect note to end on. Have a great
All right,
one.
take care. Bye.